Welcome to Behind the Title. It was great to have my colleague Phil Sumner with me today. Phil talked about his experience and the journey he's been on to help try and overcome his challenges around ADHD. Also talking about some of the triggers and the mechanisms he uses in the workplace when it comes to helping overcome some of those barriers.
Doing this is really important because it's sort of part of my personal growth, to be more open about stuff and to be more honest. Helps me become a better leader and more empathetic, and hopefully give some people at least a bit of inspiration that the vulnerability or the differences or the screw-ups are not a major problem. You know, back yourself and be kind to yourself.
Phil, welcome to Behind the Title. It is so great to have you here. We work in the same organisation.
Yeah.
We just found out we went to the same school a couple of years apart, which
the
is
universe bringing us together on this.
Very strange. For the viewers that are listening today, maybe if you could just give a bit of an introduction to you and why it was important for you to come on to today's episode.
Bit of a history about myself. So, I mean, I've been in, say, our industry for longer than I ever thought I would be, like many people starting by accident. So I've been at our mutual employer for the last 2 years, but it's the first time I've ever worked in a media agency. So for me was like a big risk. And then before that, I've done sort of research roles, commercial roles, insights roles across research companies and media companies for like the last, 25 years, which is crazy when I think about it, into the position where I am today, which, I'm kind of, yes, imposter syndrome, like, oh, you're inviting me on, and it's really nice, but constantly sort of reassessing and where I am, and my career kind of happening organically to the point where I am today without any necessary sort of master plan. By academia, I was sort of an economics student and then somehow ended up in media, which was useful, and then in sort of sales originally, which I ended up being quite good at because I like talking, but maybe I'm a better listener. And I got really passionate about what I did with research, and it sort of went from there. And I am sitting opposite you today now. When
I put the post out, I didn't quite expect the sheer volume of interest and responses from people. Why was it important to get involved in this?
I guess, until recently, I would have ignored it because be like, nah, I'm not going to be open and talk about that stuff. But, a few things have kind of happened recently, I guess sort of in my life and my career and I guess getting older, that has, I guess, kind of made me more receptive and keener to maybe talk about it. And I don't know whether that is, part midlife crisis or just getting more mature and wiser. Partly go to therapy, which I thank my wife for, saying it'll be a good thing, and losing a bit of the fear to talk about stuff and that judgment, giving kind of less of a monkeys really about what people feel about me. So it's kind of like an active decision to maybe share more and be more open, because I've spent most of my life not doing that, masking and covering stuff up, not really saying what I think a lot of the time. I don't know why, just being guarded and fear of judgment, really. So kind of an active decision to, let's say in the second half of my career, which again sounds crazy, just, I guess, being more open about stuff, which is liberating, and to support you as well.
I appreciate that. I think I've shared with you, maybe I haven't, I talk about it in every episode because I'm quite open about it. I've been sober for just over 17 years. 20th of May 2008 was when I decided to have my last drink, and I'm quite open and honest about that. Not because I'm here to brag, because I hope that it can encourage other people to reach out if they choose to try and overcome their own obstacles. But I love what you just said there about going into therapy. I've done my fair share. And the strangest type of therapy I did was play therapy. We've used that ourselves, not for me, but I'm familiar with that. Yeah. So as an adult, I've done that, and it's a bizarre concept. But again, I think thank you for just opening up about that, because for people that are watching this, I think you've absolutely qualified why you're sitting in that chair. Because this is what it's about. It's about a leader showing up differently, and that's really important. I guess we try and uncover moments in people's career. So we call it the backstage pass. So where externally everything is going well, everything's great, but actually behind the curtain, things were not the same.
It's a repetitive theme really in my career of masking, and pretending everything's all right. and not wanting to create a fuss and share and give the impression that everything is fine. But beneath, far from it. That has led to problems I can probably pinpoint 3 times in my professional career, where it's just led to, like, I call it burnout, but just stress that is, which is sort of unbearable, and then, things just unraveling. Really, when I was pretty young, sort of, decisions were made, restructures or whatever, claiming everything was fine and it's all good, and then being quite sort of put out and hurt and lack of confidence beneath the surface. But as opposed to sharing that, just internalizing it and just blowing everything up, and literally blowing it up, and getting to that sort of point where I probably could be constructive, talk to people, work it out, but feeling like I'm completely on my own with it, and then ending up in a sort of brinksmanship scenario that ends up just being really destructive, or leaving an organisation. So that probably happened first like 20 years ago. In my time for one employer overseas, a lot of succession of bad things happened in my personal life quickly. And again, I was sort of doing things up on stage, pushing myself forward, giving the impression that I was absolutely fine. And I was not okay. And it only took my manager at the time, who wasn't necessarily didn't seem like a massive empath. He knew, because he got me, and he was just like, you've got to go. You've got to take time off. Force me out, because I was refusing to step away, and the panic of everything going wrong. And it just took somebody who could see beyond it. And, I'm very thankful for that person, because it wouldn't have been able to go on. If you're going to have like a theme, I think it's sort of that, that inability to, or that fear of sharing and talking about it. And it seems obvious to me also, talking about it's good, and the therapy thing, or, the therapy thing. But it is like that inbuilt and sort of fear that, you'll share stuff and vulnerability, and then you'll get judged and it will count against you. And fundamentally, that's sort of a learned behavior over time, which only now I'm really starting to understand the destructive aspect of that, and what the reality is, that, it's just this sort of perception I've built up, and it's not the right way of going about stuff. But that takes many years to unravel. And only now am I sort of getting to grips with that. But it's hard, and I say it's a journey. But I mean, I'm only at the beginning of really understanding that, and I'm trying to change, or trying to adapt some of my behaviours at this ripe old age in my 40s.
I mean, I think you are probably one of many people in the industry, and many others, that is of a generation that perhaps didn't have to think about this stuff, or it wasn't encouraged. And that's what I'm passionate about, is trying to let people know that you can be ambitious, you can have focus and passion and enthusiasm for what you do, but you can also struggle. Opening up shouldn't be counted against you. And in fact, I think that sometimes some of the most powerful conversations I've had, either with people coming to me or vice versa, are when people have been able to disarm, or I've been able to disarm other people with, this is what's going on for me. That's one of the big areas that I'm keen that speakers like yourself, contributors on this podcast, can do. And I guess share about moments in particular where you could have said something different. Shit, I wish I'd said. Where
we can swear. We didn't even talk about that. I'm fine. I'm fine swearing. Is there a limit here?
No, I mean, not too much. Not too much. just taper that.
Okay.
But is there a story of where you've stayed silent? Be that at work, in a room, in a crisis, where you wish you'd said something different?
One big regret I have, and speaking up, and part of that is fear of conflict as well. And that's another thing about perception. I have conflict because I'm not generally a combative person, and feel like when I have conflict, it goes wrong. Some people thrive on it. Probably one time where, working with a very destructive leader, behaviours which I received, and other people, which fundamentally disagreed with, and would talk about sort of behind the scenes, but never really, always pushing it to someone else. Someone else needs to push this out there, make the change, kind of raise it properly and call people out. And looking back, it's like one of these things that actually it would have been good. It would have helped people. It would have helped me. And sort of burying my head in the sand for fear of, reprisals or fear of like judgment or what it's going to do for my career or whatever. And doing that in a constructive way. Again, I can think, a few years ago where there's a whole scenario of that. And I wish in hindsight, I kind of had the guts really to properly call that out, because it's what my values sort of were. And I feel like I probably could have helped a lot of other people, and I didn't. And, I carry a lot of guilt for that. And again, in more recent years as well, seeing stuff which I guess standing up for stuff, that you don't believe in, but having the guts to do it. I don't know whether it's one of these things you get older and you just get more confident, and as you go up and you feel like you're empowered to do that. I think that's the one thing. It's really when you see stuff you disagree with, but you don't speak up about it. And yeah, I carry a lot of guilt, and I still see things today, and I'm trying to be better all the time at being. Look, that's wrong. We should talk about it. We should call people out. I had one recently, where people are saying stuff. I don't think that's professional. I want to call people out, but and do that, and I should do where I am, and I need to do that. But I still have a fear of doing that about everything unraveling, calling people out, and and it's kind of a constant battle.
Being aware of making change is, I think, 50% of the battle.
Yeah.
The other 50% is creating forums like this where people feel comfortable, and it might trigger them to think a little bit differently next time something comes up. 9
times out of 10, you when you hit things face on constructively, the outcome is, in my experience, invariably better by having difficult conversation and by doing it. Some of the best conversations I've ever had have been the most difficult conversations that I didn't want to have. Going in them with fear, thinking about what's going to happen, being honest, terrified of doing it, but then actually being in a much better situation afterwards. And, again, logically in my head, of course, we should do this. This is going to be good. But my nature to try and keep things harmonized, I've always been a person of let's get rid of conflict. Let's just be harmonized. Let's all work it out. We can all get along, is sort of a strength and a weakness. It's a strength because I've always felt good to bring people along and give people energy and just, champion people up. But at the same time, not having the real difficult conversations that need to be had, or having them too late. But, and that, as I said, that is still that's still a continued challenge, and something I personally have to work on and put a lot more effort in than, I assume, and maybe I'm wrong, than a lot of other people that are happy to do it.
But I think effort can be represented in different ways. So I think today is, from my perspective, is like massive effort. So it may not necessarily be something that someone feels comfortable regularly calling out, because unfortunately we do. We work in a world, doesn't matter where you work, we work in a world where opinions can be divisive. We are all here. You have to look after yourself and your family and your own, and therefore, being able to progress and, financially be rewarded, you don't want to take that away. And, that's a systemic, capitalism, challenge that exists. But you talked about there, the triggers. Are there certain triggers that cause you to feel, act or behave in a different way in the workplace?
Names and noise, and that's an ADHD. That's an ADHD thing that is really difficult for remembering things, remembering names. And details in meetings and things like that, which that's a personal ongoing struggle for me, to be like, okay, having to sort of talk and, present whilst remembering what happens. That is a huge, nervous trigger for me. That, again, okay. I'm still, because again, the way that one way a brain like mine works is sort of a million miles an hour over here, but the other side, logical side of the brain, isn't necessarily thinking or recording detail, and that's a massive stress trigger for me. Or in networking or speaking, the ability to sort of hold focus on somebody, that's huge That's really, really difficult for me. And I'd say increasingly so, that ability to have functional, high-level linear conversations when a lot of stuff is going on around is really hard. I have a lot of fear going into that, whether it's an event or something, talking to people, having a straightforward conversation with all the noise and everything around. That's a massive stress trigger for me at work. And another thing that happens is, the perception of feeling like you're being rude. Because at a place like ours, it's incredibly noisy. I have to take myself off to think and concentrate. And that perception of being rude, right? It is like something that is constantly playing on my mind, going, well, why is he taking himself off? Why is he not sat with us? But I have to do that because the trigger of noise and conversations just completely blows my head up. So I have to always be taking myself off to focus, to get in that hyper-focused state to complete something. Otherwise, things don't get completed.
See, I talk to my team quite a lot about this exact trigger there, namely because for those that don't necessarily experience that same trigger, it might sometimes feel like someone is isolating themselves by putting their headphones in.
Yeah.
Or taking themselves off, so as you say there.
Yeah.
And actually what I do, because I think it is two-way, I encourage teams to be more cognizant. It's hard in any organisation, especially with lots of people being back in the office now. And I think people had a period of just quiet and calm.
Yeah.
But I also encourage, certainly people that might experience what you do, you have to be cognizant of those people.
Yeah.
So either letting them know, actually someone said to me the other day, is it worth me getting like a little flag for my laptop which just says I'm in focus mode?
Yeah.
And I said, I personally thought, I was like, great idea, but I think it actually singles you out as an individual rather than actually just saying, hey guys, I'm just going to go and have some focus time over there, hope that's all right.
Yes. And
then come back into the mix rather than sit there head down, closed out.
That's feeling empowered to be able to talk about that openly, right? Which again, I cannot claim to have been a role model to do that with myself in the past until recently, because I've never really been open about this stuff until recently. Now I'm in a podcast talking to you, which is
and doing a wonderful job, I should add.
Thank you very much.
A wonderful job.
I don't work with you much, but I can get an idea of the type of leader you are, and a lot of people that we work with are like that. Luckily, we work for an employer that is inclusive and like that. All it takes is one unprogressive leader, someone who shouldn't be a leader and is, who doesn't have that empathy. And this happens still an awful lot. People being promoted into leadership positions who really are good at doing the business but shouldn't be in positions managing people or have the empathy to do it, in my opinion. We're in this sort of new paradigm of openness, I'm going to say, over the last sort of 10, 15 years. Yeah. Probably you are with your kids and I'm with my kids, talking, being open, and that's really healthy. But at the same time, this is not still, necessarily widespread. And it takes one person, this thing, it takes one bad leader who's not on that train to really damage somebody, I think, and to not give them what they need. How we can change that, I don't know.
I think everyone has the best intentions. I think sometimes there will be circumstances that people make decisions right or wrong. I try to not get in the ring and question myself too much on those decisions, because otherwise it creates a sense of, one, anxiety, two, entitlement. Like I just have to look after what I'm doing. So I have to keep my side of the street clean every single day, right? And not worry about what everyone else is doing. Because if I do, I become jealous, I become anxious, my ego is inflated, I become fearful, I have, financial insecurity, all of these behaviors or thoughts or feelings just come up. And so I 100% get it. I try to not get in the ring with it.
Interesting.
What makes Phil, and I don't know why I'm saying it in third person terms.
Can I speak back in the third person? Yeah. Phil thinks this. We'll do that for the rest of this.
I love that. What makes you comfortable and your best self in the workplace? I'm really keen that people can take something from this, and you expressed there around your ADHD and some of the challenges that you face with that. Like, I want others to know in the workplace, and I'm not saying you have the same, everyone's the same who has ADHD, but what makes you your best self, either at home, in the workplace, what are the how can we help others create the right conditions to thrive?
One thing is sort of an understanding that there are fundamental things for people that are really easy, like sort of diary management and appointments and things like that you just expect normal and you deal with, but actually can be really problematic for someone like me, right? Like overbooking things, one thing after another, doing that, moving things around and not being respectful of your work time, your boundaries. And that's a two-way thing, right? Because it should require, let's say, people like me to be better in the way that you're working with your tech and doing that. And I'm still trying to be good, but that's a problem. It's difficult for me to do that because it's just a blind spot. But I think, fundamentally having people that are sort of respectful of that and understand that it can just be a trigger of stress. It's a massive trigger of stress for me. We talked about the ability to just have spaces from the employer point of view, having spaces to go and think, to not break your chain, for me is really important creatively, but also to have a bit of peace in my mind. And that if I don't have that, I just don't get stuff done to completion, right? And that is, again, something we can't all change individually, and it requires having a sympathetic employer, but that is incredibly important. I think as well, sometimes it's just a different way of like the creative process or going through a process and not necessarily going at a problem in a linear fashion. Again, having people around you who understand the benefit of having different thinking to a problem and are willing to accept that the way that is approached, having different ways to approach that is beneficial to come with the outcome. It's difficult. So surround yourself with people that they understand, that if you're trying to get from there to there, you might go there, and come up with loads of solutions in the meantime. That can be frustrating for people. I get it.
Hands up, that I find that really hard.
And I appreciate it, and I find that hard. I'm not a process person, but actually, in a sense, I've really taught myself to be a process person over the years, to dial up that side and to go, right, dial that up to get to the end. I've really worked on that. People have to sometimes expand it to get to the idea and give them space to do that. And now I'm sometimes not doing that to other people, and I'm like, oh my God, this is my own worst enemy. But I think you need that. You just need people to be cognizant that the way they get to an outcome might take longer, it might not be as clear, but the outcome might be better.
I think we all need to be more cognizant. There's a part of me that I think that I embrace where we are in that we are more vocal, we are more open, we are more considerate. There's another part of me that also feels that we have gone too far.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's my personal opinion. Yeah. And that's also not saying that that's wrong. Okay, I just want to be super clear. For me, it's just having an innate awareness. I've learned so doing this process with speakers like yourself. I've learned so much. You just said something to me there that I have an idea that I think could be absolutely revolutionary for neurodiversity in the workplace. You've literally just sparked something which we'll talk about after.
Good. Is this a company you're going to set up that?
No,
I'm going to have a share of.
No, well, I mean, yes, why not? I don't mind saying it now. Like, why on earth do we not have areas in offices or floors which are specifically set up like you have on a train, which are quiet zones, like a library, that are enabled for everyone, but they are encouraged for people that might be challenged with neurodiversity. Now, I know there's lots of reasons why lots of people say they wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But at the same time, why is it that we cater for the majority and not the minority? That, for me, is an interesting debate to have.
But that's the sort of cognitive dissonance there, because I think we've gone too far in some respects. We can keep going further. We can be accommodating for everything, and we should be. But also, there is a limit to that, and the labelling thing as well. It's like everyone's different, and I think over time, and I think my wife said this actually. It's like, it's this better understanding, I think, that maybe doesn't come across in like psychometric testing or STI, the red, blue, green thing. That doesn't necessarily come across about the way people work and how to get the best out of them and who they are when they're coming in and what their preferences are. Because I think as an employer and an employee, if you have an innate, well, not an innate, but you have a better understanding about what those person's preferences are, how they work, how they get to a problem, and what they need, in a more contemporary way, I actually think it would be better for employer-employee. And I think people are sort of working that out and going, oh, well, they have that, people are labelled with this or that. Everyone's on a spectrum to a degree, right? I think we can all agree with that. But people just work in different ways, and I think we just need to be better to understand what they are, what the preferences are, and what that person needs to succeed, as opposed to accommodating for everything, because we just accept that there are differences and work with it.
Yeah.
And understand what they are, because I couldn't rightly say across my team, what the preferences were of everyone.
We talked earlier about you've entered into therapy. Was there a specific, moment, and that might be a piece of feedback, failure, or realization that changed how you see or saw yourself? Because it sounds like you're sitting here today having reconciled with the fact that you're a bit older, more experienced. You can take control of you, and you can support others. Was there a single moment that changed that for you? Did you experience something?
Yeah, a combination of things. I think sort of the pressure I put on myself from a work point of view, always trying to kind of push the boundaries and take stuff on, and creating levels of stress which are unsustainable and happen again, repeated patterns. Having a partner who's very supportive, progressive, open, and working on sort of self-improvement, and over time just working and chipping away is important. I had some recent bereavements as well, and that was, I guess, sort of a focus, because a lot of things came together at one time. And last year was really, it was a difficult year for me. It was sort of transitional year, and there were points that became, very difficult. And I think having people close to you in your life that see that, but have the frustration of seeing the repetitive aspect of that, and then the fear that, they're there to support you, but if they've seen this book before, right? Multiple times. And I think there's only so many times somebody can see that. Everyone's got patience that will run out. And I think people are there to support you, but if you're not there really doing something to try and improve that, I think that does become a problem. And maybe there was the fear that actually if I didn't do that, I might lose what I had. And thinking about actually how important it is what I have, and actually I can't have this inertia, because the definition of madness is doing the same thing and expecting exactly different results, and that not happening. So I think it is a combination on sort of big life events, but also the fear that things may unravel and you can't just repeat this behavior. The fatigue of it happening as well, the inevitability of it happening again, and the fatigue of that, and the destructive behaviours that come with that.
Do you spot it ever?
I only when it's too late.
It's amazing. So I run another event internally in our organisation, and we had a speaker come along, a guy called Danny Gray, who founded a business called Jack, JAQ, and that's fundamentally what it's been set up to do. So at the moment we have lots of mental health resources, charities, you've got Mind, you've got Samaritans, you've got, many others, but they're all at the point of crisis.
Yeah.
What they're not at is at the point of helping people overcome before they get to crisis. And so, I'm a big advocate for being able to take the time out when you just, again, the trigger.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not quite right. So,
yeah. And I mean, again, all of that's this is the thing, I would give that advice to anyone I work with, anyone that worked with me. But I don't, and this is the thing, I can't lead by example, which becomes problematic. And I'd be like, no, you are that. And I would try and be, vigilant and go, look, that's it. Doesn't matter, take time off.
Yeah.
But then not leading by example in that case. And so it going too far, and this fear that, if you're like, no, I'm going to take time out and give myself time, that things are going to fall apart.
Yeah.
From a work point of view. And again, that's something which is logically not right, because it should never be right that things are just on one person, but this fear that everything's going to sort of pile up and the world's going to come to an end, and it's all just in your head. And I guess that's the theme. It's like, okay, look, I have to look after myself more, because there's only so much you can, flog something before it will fall apart. And actually coming to the realization that is okay, and not something that you're going to get badly judged or go, oh, that person's weak or whatever. And that's just taken a long time. And I think that's partly who I am. That's partly family history, partly circumstance of businesses I've worked for and leaders and people I've worked for that are like that, that has sort of had a lot of beliefs that have built up that are not true. And for me, it's unpicking them at this, ripe old age and trying to rewire that. I don't think it matters when you start. The fact that if you recognize that, nothing's going to be fixed overnight, but you can start fixing small things over time. And it takes time to rewire yourself. But rewire yourself sounds extreme, but it takes time to unpick things. But I don't think it's ever too late to do that. And, we should all just be kind to ourselves, because you get older, you've got kids, you've got family, and you're like, oh, this is like what is important. And it sounds like a cliche, but you do maybe sit back, and it is a midlife thing, and you're like, okay, well, what is important? And I still struggle, and I say that, but I still, if you speak to people close to me, I go, God, yeah, it's great you say that, but actually, are you doing it? And for me, that's a real battle. There's a real thing I'm continuing to try and do every day.
We like to issue a permission slip. I guess give others permission to feel, say, or stop doing something from today. What would your permission slip be for anyone that's listening to this episode?
It's expanding on the last one, but permission to be kind to yourself and have empathy for yourself, and permission to step away and to breathe, and that time to have distance, and giving yourself that permission that it will be fine, that everything will continue, and that you need the permission to sit back and go, what do I need? How can I advocate for myself? And that's not selfish. That's not self-centered. That is completely necessary for you to be the best person that you are. And if you don't give yourself that space and that time to reflect and that time to think, you are not going to be in the best version of you. And you have to give yourself kindness. Amazing.
The advice is spot on, because I think we said it before, the way that I see myself versus other people, most of the time, what I'm hyper alerted to when someone else has not even thought of.
No.
The amount of times that something has happened and it's gone round and round in my head, and I've had to say to that person, I'm sorry. They're like, for what?
For what?
Or, I've sent an email and I'm like, oh my God, I use the word and instead of if.
Yeah, exactly. And or presenting, and I get that when you do presentations. And
we do lots of pitches, right?
You want everything to be perfect. The minutiae generally gets forgotten about, but you'll sit there stressing over the fact you didn't deliver that one line perfectly, and it doesn't matter. And there may be people that disagree with that, but I think they're wrong. It's about the overall picture, what you, who you are, what your values are, what you present, and you focus on all that minutiae, you will send yourself mad. Everyone, the best bit of advice I ever got from a leader who I won't name, but went on, became very successful in the industry, a big CEO who I had the honor of working with closely, said to me, this is what, 2012, someone I respect massively, and she said, look, I screw up things every day, Phil. Every day I get things wrong. And I make calls which aren't right. And we had to make a call together and it was the wrong call. And she goes, look, this happens and will always happen. And you just have to grow, move on and learn from it. But you will continue to do that. And I have taken that. And that's sort of a mantra that I have and go, look, stuff happens and it will continue to happen. So how you deal with it and what you learn from it. But that happens to everyone. So don't worry if everything isn't perfect.
Phil, honestly, whatever was in your head before about you sitting there, you fully earned and are qualified. That was outstanding. Just honesty, about a leader showing up differently. You are truly leading the way. So thank you so much for joining.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate it. And check out the next episode when you can. Thanks a lot, guys.